But I think it's the stylistic approach. Like, Ramen has some intriguing builds that he opens with.
For sure.
And what reminds me of Recon is, like, Recon Hillimity has this where very solid opening plan, but then there's kind of this what next stage. And I think we've seen that from Ramen multiple times.
For sure, yeah. I think one of the things we have seen from him as well throughout, like, just playing with him in general, is always just, like, he kind of does half and half, which seems to be a little bit of a problem. So I hope he can do something like that, especially now that we see in the draft. He's picked HRE, and if you half and half a Burger and a Regnitz play, I don't know how that works out, but not well.
Yeah, and to your whole point, the half and half, that was the meta like 2 years ago, right? Like the best players were doing that. They want the backup plan. But you can't get away with that anymore. It's interesting because it kind of speaks to the caliber, like this new talent coming in, right? You got young kids, Dragavan just got knocked out. We got the kid. We got Ramen appearing. These players, you kind of feel for them. It's like they're starting behind the starting line, right? Like the people like Dumu and Beast have been doing it for a long time.
Yeah,
it makes you wonder where they're going to be if they can keep that vigorous training up. Just like this guy who has a longer legacy than I think people realize.
I think so too. He's been playing Age of Empires 1.
Yes. Which I called him out as weird because he says his approach, he likes things to kind of be orderly, make sense, just kind of standard. Doesn't want like a Dragavan type series, right? Where it's like,
no,
why is he boxing?
I think genuinely, Baltune Dragavan could probably go 3-2. Just because of the shenanigans that Dragavan does.
Yeah.
And it would just be so beyond what he usually wants to play. And I feel like I'm in the same boat as Baltune.
Yeah.
It's like if...
Are you that guy? Why is this guy making a third TC?
Yeah, it's like,
that's not the meta.
This isn't the script, right? If it goes off script, then you suddenly go, I haven't seen this before.
I think the interesting thing within that as well is like what I found really contradictory is like Baltune comes from AoE 1. I was like, wasn't AoE 1 like really just hardcore send it? He's like, yeah.
I mean, to be fair, I've actually never the only AoE 1 I've ever seen was Red Bull 2 years ago.
Yes.
And
it was kind of dive TC, club villagers to death.
Yeah.
A lot, right?
Like
so it's quite intriguing, right? To kind of come from that as your background, and then you arrive in AoE4, you're like, oh, this is calming, this is more structured. And, it's interesting because I think, what map are we opening up behind here?
Dry Arabia.
We are getting the Dry Arabia.
So it's Rus HRE on Dry Arabia, which to me just seems like...
That's a Rus freebie, mate.
It feels like a Rus freebie, indeed. And one of the things that actually... I kind of want to look at is just the thought process of picking Rus on Dry Arabia, because obviously, like how the draft works, which we haven't really talked about, is you blind pick your civs, right? You do not know what your opponent is doing, and you do not know the specific order. The only thing we do know is that we are opening on Dry Arabia, and then loser picks map. So with that information, going Rus on Dry Arabia just seems so... fascinating to me. It seems like maybe Ramen expected something else.
It's like what else was it like Ibis maybe in there come to mind? Because we are hopping into the opening game of the series. Remember, folks, this is an elim. Whoever loses here is going to be out in this BO5. And with Rus and HRE coming in, to your whole point of the way the draft plays out, it just kind of seems like pick your OP civ, right? It's kind of that feeling right now. If people had to rate, if you just got the whole community together and said, rate the top civs, these two are in the top 4.
For sure. And speaking of like meta and stuff, like one of the things that I was like a little bit sad about, and I don't want to say annoyed because I really wasn't, was the fact that like I wanted King of the North to be played on the new patch, right? Which would have changed.
You can dream.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it would have been fun, right? The only problem with that is like the practice would kind of go out the window with the changes we've seen so far.
I think you need, and for that, you kind of need a format that's more 5 to 7 days long.
Maybe, yeah.
Because I always call it the meta setter, right?
Yes.
Where like everyone has their ideas, they come in, and then someone's like, oh, your idea is better. And they need a little bit of time to process that. Otherwise, you get something a bit more stompy.
For sure. And but like to prove my own point wrong, it was like... it was really fun to see like what came out of it, like overhearing like certain players just talk about stuff, right? It was just like, okay, this and this and this, and I went, you know what? That I've never seen before, and that might actually work, right?
Yes, and it's like I think we were discussing this a bit. Like the whole idea, the ideology behind Scandinavia and Holy Island is like if both players don't want water, they don't have to have water.
Yep.
But I mentioned there's an interesting dynamic there where the experienced pros will want Holy Island, they won't want Scandinavia, and the newbie players, or the fresher players who haven't got that tournament experience, they're not familiar with Holy Island. So Scandinavia is their wild card. So I think you're quite often going to see that dynamic where both should get shoved out.
Yeah, kind of. And I mean, to be fair, like Baltune, he said to me, I mean, he's playing right now, so he can't come back at me for this one. He's just going to ban Scandinavia. I don't want it. Never practice it. Don't want to play it.
Ben's the same.
Just, I mean, and it makes sense, right? Yeah. Of course, like we have Red Bull coming up, right, and Demu, and everyone has limited time. And I mean, while I don't want to say it out loud, this is a minor event. It's a small event where people, it's kind of for fun to a certain extent, right? Of course, you still want to win a LAN event because that stamp on your resume is pretty good, winning a LAN event. But
and the absolutely amazing crown you get.
Absolutely, yeah. Cue video. No, so
they'll do that.
Yeah, probably. But yeah, like speaking of meta, we have 2 TC Roos here just casually going up, and we did actually have Ramen going to Scouts, which I think just like if you just change the SID matchup just a little bit, and it's HRE versus French, for example, or JD, you still, in my opinion, you still want to go 2 Scouts just to get the maximum amount of sheep, and you can do the same on something like Fish and Marshes, but I've heard Voldemar and Sass, I think it was, speaking a little bit about it in Twitch chat, where it was like, okay, maybe 2 Scouts is still a bait, because like it delays your timing on Fish and Marshes specifically. But on Dry Arabia, I think it just makes a lot of sense, right? Kill Jardy, mainly the person to look out for, never gets enough sheep, so maybe you should just do 2 Scout every game. I
mean, the thing about doing it with HRE is actually it keeps the door open for a Berg Ray potential. Like, one's usually not enough. And it sounds like, yeah, but Ramen is so good. Why would I want to do that? Multiple reasons. Like in this matchup, why Roos are so favored is because they walk out on 2 TC and they fortify Palisade Wall, these relics, right? That's a big issue in general in this matchup. But I think, are we getting that now? It feels too early. Usually you do this around like maybe 7 minutes, you march out. But that, it takes so long to burn through, right? So like why Bergrave can feel good there is you have that flood point, even just Spearman, enough to burn through a 2,500 HP structure and get your hands on it. But that's only really on the table, I find, with 2 Scouts. But instead,
we have
Ramen,
2 TCs.
Yeah, this is kind of onto the cuff a little.
Yeah, this seems very interesting to me, and I want to see Baltune's villager dedication right now. If we can have a look at his quick there, if he's actually...
Oh, he's going greedy.
So he's going far out. But look at the position he has, right? He has Deer and Boar at the same place, right? So you can pull the Boar towards him, and if he drops the TC right there, so he has... That's an amazing spot, and he can pull the board.
And this is wild, because here's the other reason why he's doing this, because of what Ramen's done.
Yeah.
You can't do that type of TC against HRE with the feudal all-in timing if you know they're all-in. But because it's a 2 TC mirror, Baltune takes advantage. He gets an insanely good spawn now. And on the other side, like, what's Ramen really secured there? Gold. What are you going to do? Because if this turns into a long feudal, the gold spawn feels a bit rough now for the TC. Yep. If you fast castle, there's now that impeding threat. Relics get walled in. And now your fast castle timing's worse because you went 2 TC.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, and this kind of goes back a little bit to the burger discussion we had a little bit about, right? It's like, okay, you're now on 2 TC, you have a lot of sheep. A farm transition is at the same time easier and harder, right? Because you need more farms to sustain the amount of villagers you are producing. You need a lot more food villagers on food to actually be sustaining that. And look at it, he's already dropping a bunch of farms, right? Because he was floating a little bit of wood there, a little bit hard to sometimes macro. And one thing that's actually a little bit important to notice is the fact that Ramen didn't drop a mining camp as well, right? It's like, it's a small detail. It still, walking distance was still a little bit long, but it's still inspiration range, 50 wood saved, and it's an extra farm.
And the interesting thing is you might look at that, and I think he could have actually gotten even closer if the Arkans further out, but the issue there is against Roos. Someone was interested in the early game is Baltune. He had what he needed for a tech up. He was sitting on extra gold. The wheelbarrow is delayed. There's a risk that if you do that type of loose Arkan, it's a night opener. We've seen that's very popular with the Roos, and that punishes these more greedy extensions, right? We are now going to get the knights added on delay, and the worry here is Ramen is going to have to now waste more time around feudal, adding in spearmen to try and offset this issue. The good news is eventually, if you do have to flood spearmen, you will have a way to break into those walled off relics.
For sure, for sure. And yeah, it's a play will soon, shortly, I think, from Baltune moving out and walling those relics when he sees that, hey, okay, fast castle is now coming. And which we kind of are. We are seeing horticulture, actually, coming up. And that is just the sheer amount and
Wait, this is not to war relics. This is something more
No.
nefarious.
No.
Is he gonna? He's got proxy archery,
Look
or
at this. No. There's a tiny spot next to
is he
the
actually going for the wooden
Look at the
fortress? He is. That is such an aggressive wooden fortress.
It's not like a secret one either. It's like, yeah, I'm building this.
But it's smart on the timing, right? Because he's like, yep, please come and contest me.
Kremlins.
But the knights are the bigger issue, right?
Yep,
So like, I
for
think
sure.
you hold on the edge of vision. Ramen is going to inherently be like, oh, stupid tower.
I mean,
torches and then die, right? This is brutal.
I mean, what was Ramen's response here? He needs to pull villagers, and he's pulling villagers. Cancel, night charge.
3, 2, 1. Surprise, Mother Ducker Knight is in, and now all of a sudden to contest this is far too expensive. So he has to forfeit the full farm surround. I think he might even, with Arislitz, be able to reach 2 or 3 of these farms on the south side.
Probably. And the most important, like another important thing here, is the extra vision you can get from the wooden fortress there as well. And it will give you full vision of what Ramen is doing in his base. And with that, you can know exactly what he's doing, exactly what to make to counter it. And I think Ramen is basically forced into a burger play here.
Yeah.
But with what food? Like, look at this as well. He's moved all of his sheep to the right side inside of the Aachen range. And that just means that the arrow slits.
They won't be able to reach the sheep, right? It's more general issue if you're kind of clipped to, I want to say maybe 12 to 14 farms maximum, which is not great for a Burgrave play. So he's going to go for the Regnants. We have to remember, although the pressure's here, the positive is, because Baltune done this, that's the wood that should have been around relics.
Yes.
The negative, however, is all the knights. And oh my god.
Can we get a Dragoman camera and see how he reacts to the proxy range at this point?
Deep breaths. He's like, it's all I've ever dreamed of.
I've seen this one before, and Clown Card Inc.
You know, I was saying a while back, I miss the old Roos boar proxy base builds. This is just an amplification. Why stop off at the boar when you can just stop off at the enemy base? And
This as well, right? It's just so rough. He has nowhere to go. 2 nights in now. No textiles either, I think.
No
right?
wheelbarrow
so it's
either.
just like, yeah, no wheelbarrow either. Yes, Regnants will go up, but again, right, you have no units to actually control, and it's just GG.
that's going to be it. Game 1 is going to be a quick and done in favor of Baltune. I mean, people are looking at it and be, okay, was that a bit weird? Why was Ramen playing that way? If we're being totally real, you have to play weird as HRE there. If you play the script, if you go fast castle, we mentioned the Roos wall you off. If you play even an all-in feudal, I find right now the Kremlin is a big sticking point. It's so hard to penetrate that defense.
It is. Like, it's not as bad as a White Tower, but it's still pretty bad just because of the feudal landmark that has arrow slits.
Yes. And the castle turret, which is just insane. I think someone done like the maths on it. It's closer to being a castle age landmark in DPS than a feudal age.
Yeah, it sounds like a Corvinus. sounds like a Corvinus. Yeah, we can see here, right, the economy count. I mean, it is pretty even, all things considered, right? Ramen maybe like he had a little bit of later TC timing, but it's just the military, right?
Yeah.
There was nothing he had that could potentially like back this up, right? I think maybe in this situation, like you go 2 TC, but you need to then play the prolonged feudal to actually do something against the Roos.
And that's what I thought he might lean into, is like maybe it's 2 TC all feudal, or just 1 TC all feudal. You try to dent and punish, but you know you can't take anything away from Baltune. We mentioned already that loose TC is a ripple effect of the choice Ramen made, and you know this is, I think, the big difference we're possibly going to see in the series. We need to see a Ramen that, you know, he has a solid strategy to begin with. If something happens, how do you pivot quickly, right?
Yeah.
Because the best players in the world are good at that. Anyone can play the perfect game when nothing weird happens, right? When it plays out accordingly. The difference maker is going to be the people that are able to pivot immediately and respond.